صوت بلاد سوريا.
الله محيي الجيش، الله محيي الجيش، الله محيي الجيش.
Well, I have to say, I am so pleased to be here. I have waited 10 years to tell this story. I remember after 9/11, when my CIA handler, Richard Fuse, told me that there really wasn't going to be much of a 9/11 investigation. And we were going to try to keep the people calm. That's what he said. We're going to keep them calm. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we don't really need them to know everything that we were doing before 9/11. And I said, well, why? What do you think what do you think's going to happen when they find out that you didn't tell them the truth? Why don't you just tell them the truth right now? And he said, well, that's not really what they want to do. So I had different ideas. I will tell you straight off the bat that right after 9/11, my CIA handler received a $13 million payoff from the 9/11 investigation that was supposed to be money used for the Iraqi, to secure Iraq's cooperation. And I ended up getting indicted on the Patriot Act. I was the second non-Arab American ever indicted on the Patriot Act after Jose Padilla. I was what's called an asset.
Right. Okay.
I was an intelligence asset. I was supervised by handlers for the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. I was not covert, but you guys have no idea what actually happened. This is like the lies are so much bigger than what you know. And it's so much deeper, and it's so much more tragic once you have the truth. First of all, the CIA has a long track record of doing false flag operations on itself. I was having meetings with the full knowledge and permission of the CIA with Iraq's ambassador to the United Nations on resuming the weapons inspections. It is very important for you to understand that this story with 9/11 also ties in deeply to what happened with Iraq. And contrary to everything you were told, the Iraqis were not resistant to weapons inspections. They had a comprehensive agenda. The CIA had already a comprehensive agenda for resolving the entire conflict without war at all. And it involved weapons inspections, cooperation with anti-terrorism, and major financial contracts for U.S. corporations and oil. And this would be developed over a period of time. But we already had, by November of 2000, we already had an agreement with the Iraqi government. We had a framework agreement that was, at that point, it was undefined, not so well defined, and we had to make it defined. But they had already consented to all of these things. They wanted peace with us. And so by February of 2001, the Iraqis had agreed to invite the FBI to send a task force into Baghdad with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations and to make arrests of terror suspects. This is very important for you to understand. So this is like the background of what you have to know. And I can tell you that in April of 2001, I was summoned to my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuse, and he said he had a message for me to deliver to New York at the earliest possible convenience. And the message was this: we are looking for information on a conspiracy to hijack airplanes. We expect the target to be the World Trade Center. We think they're going to fly the airplanes into the World Trade Center. And we want the Iraqis to provide it's called actionable intelligence. So Saddam had been one of our best sources on terrorism throughout the 1990s. Iraq hated terrorism because they believed that they hated Islamic jihadis. He did. Whether you like Saddam or not, whether you hate Saddam or not, he hated Islamic conservatives. He was convinced that they would take advantage of the crumbling of authority in Baghdad under the sanctions, and that they would then try to overturn his government, and the poverty of the people from the sanctions would fuel this problem, would help overturn his government. So he wanted to help us at every turn, keep these people from becoming too powerful. Okay, and so we knew this. So when I go to New York in April of 2001, I'm very friendly, and I say, hey, look, could you send the message to Baghdad? Let them know we're looking for this. Thanks. And the message from the Iraqis in April of 2001 is, hey, send the FBI. We've already agreed to send we've already invited you to send the FBI. Come on. Tell them, just bring them on. Sure. Wow, you didn't know that, did you? Okay, so I go back to Washington, and I get a phone call from Richard. He said, come down to my office. I want to hear what they said. I go down. I said, oh, I was real polite. Yeah, I gave him a message. Sure. He said, I didn't tell you to be nice. And I go back. He's like, you go back to New York and you deliver the message exactly the way that I told you to deliver the message. And I said, well, Richard, I don't want them to think I'm threatening them, because, I believe in like negotiations and conflict resolution. He said, no, I don't want them to think you are threatening them. And he said, I don't want them to think I am threatening them. I want you to tell them this threat of war originates at the highest level of government, above the CIA director and above the Secretary of State. That it would be three men: President George Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and no one else. Those are the three people who are threatening war. And I want to be really clear about the message that I was ordered to give them. We demand that you turn over any actionable, any fragment of intelligence outlining a conspiracy involving airplane hijackings and a strike on the World Trade Center. If you withhold this information, if we discover that you have withheld this information and the attack occurs, then we will bomb you back to the Stone Age. You will be bombed harder than you've ever been bombed before. You will be destroyed. The Iraqis were now offering the weapons inspections, which of course the United States had very rigorous standards for the weapons inspections. Iraq was offering cooperation with anti-terrorism to allow the FBI to go in. And Iraq started to offer a lot more. A lot more came on the table. By June and July of 2001, Iraq was offering the United States preferential contracts. Now think about the economy today. Preferential contracts for the United States corporations on telecommunications, healthcare, hospital equipment, pharmaceuticals, transportation. Iraq offered to buy 1 million American manufactured automobiles every year for 10 years. Think of what that would have done to the economy. And I hated the sanctions. I was doing this because I hated the sanctions. I was doing it because I thought, because they had destroyed education, they wiped out literacy in a single generation, they destroyed the hospitals and the healthcare system. Iraq performed the second heart transplant in the world, and we wiped them out. Okay? 11,000 people died every month. By the end of 1996, 500,000 children had died of sanctions, and they only counted 5-year-olds and younger. They didn't even count the 6-year-olds because the United Nations was holding back the numbers. And after that report in December of 96, they stopped counting it. The United Nations never published another report on the deaths. So frequently what you will hear is that only 500,000 children died, but in fact they continued to die, and approximately 1 million children died. They were babies. They weren't even alive when the first Gulf War happened. This was an offense against, this is genocide. This is a mass genocide. So that's my motivation. But the CIA did not have my motivation. They were out to make sure that the United States was not going to be punished for what they had done. And I was like, and believe me, by this point, we just wanted to get rid of the sanctions. The Iraqis were like, if they don't get rid of the sanctions, you bet. We'll give them anything they want.
Who's to gain, who's to lose?
Well, I believe, the tragedy was that it was before 9/11 ever happened, they already knew about this peace framework. And they already knew that they could have, the United States would receive no punishments at all or no punishments. They would not face any problems because of the years of support for the sanctions. The Iraqis wanted the sanctions off so badly that they were going to give the United States everything, just amazing things. Oil. Yeah, they could have had everything, even oil. And the only group that wasn't going to benefit was the military-industrial complex, because this would have been peace. This would have been a very prosperous peace. Believe me, the CIA was driving a hard bargain. Anything that we could think to add, I mean, and I have to say, again, I'm anti-sanctions, so I know that a lot of people would say, well, that's not fair to do to the Iraqis, and I agree with you. I agree with you. But it was what the CIA wanted, and they were going to have every single thing that they could think to get. And they wanted, and at the same time, we all knew that it would have to be tremendous to appease George Bush, because he was out for, you know, the Daddy Bush fantasy, this delusion. It was a delusion. But the one group that was not going to benefit was the military-industrial complex. And they were going to be the big losers in this whole thing. They were not going to be able to have their wars. They were not going to be able to sell their military weapons systems. The $400 billion, we wouldn't need all that for this equipment or that equipment. They wouldn't need any of it. And so they were the losers, and they were just too powerful. Good. The sanctions were on to punish Iraq for allegedly having weapons of mass destruction. And they said that they would keep the sanctions on Iraq until all weapons of mass destruction were confirmed to have been destroyed. Now, it appears that they were actually destroyed by the end of 96 or 97, but the United States was, you know, had an ulterior agenda, which was they were not going to let go of the sanctions until Saddam was out of power. But what had happened was, by the year 2000, while Bill Clinton was still in office, the international loathing for sanctions had become intense. 2 million people had died from sanctions. Between 1.7 million and 2.2 million had died. And the international community was violating the sanctions. The German pilots were and Jordanian pilots were, and actually it was coming from all over Europe. Germany was the first, and they had pilots fly humanitarian supplies over the air through sovereign airspace and land at Baghdad airport, and then a whole bunch of other countries followed suit, and they were all like, we're not going to do this. This is wrong. It is immoral. It is a crime against humanity, and we recognize that. And so at that point, the CIA, I wanted to do it, but at that point, the CIA knew that they were losing control of the situation and that they better step in and do something. And I wanted to end the sanctions, so I was glad the pilots were doing this. But the CIA was very, very expedient. It was politically expedient. They were losing control of the situation. They wanted to take back their power. The Iraqis tried to give the Bush administration several $100,000 in campaign contributions, so that during the presidential election, because they wanted to show that they wanted to be friends with America. And I had reported that to my defense intelligence handler. He was like, holy shit, you got to tell the Iraqis not to do this. You got to make them not do this. And because it reminded them all of the Asian fundraising crisis under Clinton. And he said, don't they watch C-SPAN? Don't they know they're not supposed to do this? And he said, you go back and you tell them that if we find out they gave money to the Republican Party in this campaign, we're going to bomb them. We're going to, you know, but see, at this point, Iraq had been bombed so many times, you couldn't threaten them with bombing anymore because they'd already been attacked. How are you going to, like, impress on people who, oh, you're going to bomb us again? Okay. Sure. You know.